Hello, and welcome to Stroke by Stroke. And welcome to part 2 of this multi-part tutorial series. Let's just dive on in. This is the Bloodstone Genuine again. This video starts off slow, where I am just adding more pigments, just like in part 1. But around the 20-minute mark, 18 to 20 minutes, I will start doing a lot more instruction voiceover. So feel free to skip if you want. But I hope you stick around. Pay attention to the delicate and fine strokes that I'm using as I'm putting these pigments in. There's a lot of subtlety happening. And also remember, this is on mineral paper, not watercolor paper. This is the Lunar Blue again. This is Mayan Blue Genuine again. Coming back in with that Endothrone blue, which I really like. That is such a gorgeous blue. Look at that. That is really nice. This is the Mayan Dark Blue again. The way I hold the brush, when I go straight up and down like that, I'm using the very tip of the brush. It blocks the view a little bit from the camera, but it's really important to pay attention to how you're holding the brush too. Coming back to the Moon Glow. And in thinking about holding the brush, also how close to the bristles are you holding it? That makes a difference too, in terms of control particularly. So the closer to the bristles I hold it, the more control I have. The further away, the less control I have. This is the Quinacridone Purple. Such an amazing color here. And all of these little subtle, or not so subtle, motions of the brush um, make a huge difference when doing abstract. I did all those abstract pictures and I still do them, of course. But it helps me to create something that is so much more interesting to look at. I think this is just my opinion. If I add the abstract qualities to something that is suggestive of representational, because this is certainly not something that you can see with the naked eye. But it's good. You know, it's good to have variety like that. So try to see, if you want to challenge yourself, try and see how you can marry the two, abstract and representational. Okay, I've wiped my brush off here on my fingers, and I'm just gently, very gently coming in here. I could have switched to a smaller brush if I'd wanted to, but I don't think I need to, because the tip of this works very well for fine detail stuff. And this is a completely dry, smaller brush. I'm just doing little teeny tiny details now, because I'm actually kind of liking what I'm seeing here. Of course, you've heard me say that before. It's oftentimes just as important about what you're taking off as to what you're adding. I apologize if my head was covering what's happening there. I'm sorry. I can't see out the monitor while I'm painting because it's way up there. Like I said, I do use my phone for pretty much everything. All right, I'm going to come back in here to the bottom part. Going back to my original brush. So the one I was using there is a size 3. This one is my 11. This is environmentally friendly red iron oxide. So basically rust. This is German green raw umber. Coming back here to the serpentine genuine. And this is Perylene Green. Check out what happens when I add the green to the bottom here, how it just begins to tie it all together and adds so much depth. It's a very lovely green, actually. It's quite blue, but that doesn't bother me. Look at how the blues of that green are really making the reds and oranges pop. And this is also one of those colors that just kind of goes on and on a little bit. Will do a long way. Notice how as I'm doing more and more to the image, I'm starting to have more detail and not so much loose. So the detail is how I can actually control the illusion of reality and start to bring things kind of into focus. So that's something that happens as I continue going, and you'll notice that if you watch for it. This is the Green Apatite Genuine again. Notice how I will reinforce things with different colors of the same like green in this situation. It's a much yellower green. Color temperature, whether it's warm or cool, is so important. So play with that a little bit in your images. Here I'm using color, opposite colors. Red and green are opposite each other on the color wheel. And you can see how when I add this, it creates a much more dynamic line because I've got green in the red, and it's a warm green, so it's a yellowish green. It kind of goes, but it also creates a lot more interest by doing this. It really makes it pop. So understanding color theory and the color wheel is really important, especially if you're doing like abstract type things. And then this is my, what was this, a 3? Yeah, 3, and it's dry. This is Rare Green Earth. I think this is the 3rd shade of green that I have used in this particular area, and it really just helps with layering. And I am very big on doing very subtle little changes to things that just really help them pop. And this is just that process again of starting very loose, very broad, big colors, that kind of thing. And now coming in, once I've zeroed in on exactly what it is I'm wanting to do in this image, because when I started I had no idea, but very quickly I started realizing I was making like a stylized, an abstract stylized landscape. And layering, and this is what's so great about having the micro dots, 266 different colors to choose from. I can't afford all the tubes, but I can certainly afford like the $30 that these cost.
I've just used my fingers to flatten the brush. And it also removed the water. I mean, it's a damp brush. I didn't get all the water, but it's okay.
It might seem like a waste removing things, but it's that subtlety. It helps just really bring the interest to do things like this.
And this is Nickel Azo Yellow.
In the last video, I talked about how to use the brush for different kinds of strokes, and this is a great example that shows. And also the contrast, these are harmonious colors because they are green and yellow and they're much closer to each other on the color wheel, but the brush strokes are helping, and also just the value, the dark and light that this is doing. It really helps it pop. See that yellow? It's just glorious.
This is Van Dyke Brown.
I almost never use black in situations like this because a color just adds so much more interest. Of course, I do use blacks, but I use them judiciously. I think it's much more interesting to use different colors to layer up and get the contrast.
And this is good old Lunar Black.
And speaking of black, if I'm going to use a black, I like to use one that is interesting, and I'm just using it to reinforce what I've already done with other colors. This is just another reason that rules, I learn the rules, I play with them, and then I use them as I need. And yeah, I'm not going to say don't ever use black. Just use it smartly. There is so much power in just layering color after color after color, using the color wheel and the warms and the cools and the different values, lights, darks, neutrals, whatever. But just layering things because it's going to show, and it's much, much more interesting if there's a bunch of layers to the colors.
All right, coming back to the Shadow Violet.
You might remember from part 1 the differences in the brush strokes. You'll see here I'm using long brush strokes and little tiny dabs together. And so that helps to blend things in different ways and once again creates interest. And I'm being very gentle while I'm doing this. I am not using a very heavy hand at all.
And this is Sodalite Genuine again.
Another thing that you'll see me do often is, like right this second, how I'm putting the pigment at the top of the brush stroke. And that really helps to create that contrast and interest in different parts. So it's just a dance back and forth between all of these different things. And the more you do, the more you'll begin to see what you want to do and how it's going to affect the overall piece. And the whole point of this is to move the viewer's eye around the piece, and keeping your eye going in the image creates real interest and drama.
This is French Ultramarine. And this is just plain old ultramarine blue. This is manganese blue hue.
Here you can see all the things happening basically at one time. I am using blues of different colors over and over each other. I'm doing different brush strokes, and it's all telling a story. Because making a piece of art, if it tells a story, and I'm not talking about, a narrative, I'm talking about this is a story right this minute about blue. It's a story about interest. It's a story about moving the eye.
This is Prussian blue.
Notice how the different blues are speaking very slightly different stories. This blue that I'm putting in right now is much more moody than the other blue that I had just put on. And by doing this tapping, it's almost like a pointillist, which is just, little dots and stuff. But I know that the liquid is going to level out a little bit And also, it's just fascinating. And here you can see how just going in and, you know, bringing that through different colors. How exciting is that? Lifting out is a wonderful way to begin to build contrast. You can see how that the light and the dark, and I'm getting ready to do something that's going to really accentuate that.
This is Chinese white. My water is blue, so it's going to come in blue.
Adding the white is helping this look more cloudy. And you can see how it's blending the Chinese white with the pigments underneath, and see how it is accentuating the contrast and value. So I'm a huge fan of adding white if it's needed, but using it as a blending agent. I just love how it harmonizes things. And you'll see here in this longer view, you can really begin to see the difference. And it's huge. Building up layers of color and contrast and subtlety. That's the key, really.
Okay, this is titanium white.
As you can see here, not all whites are created the same. Titanium white here will hold that bright, opaque edge, and see how I'm just blending into that, but I'm keeping that little teeny tiny bit there of highlight. That's the superpower of titanium white. Chinese white is great for a subtle lightening of things. Titanium is a much heavier hitter, and you'll be able to see here when I add right here the titanium right where I had already used the Chinese white. It's an incredible contrast. So knowing what your materials do is so helpful. It might not seem like such a big deal, but this part of this painting, where I am right now, is absolutely crucial to the entire image having dynamic interplay between the colors, between the patterns, between the contrast, the repetition, moving from different parts to different parts of the image to make sure that I'm staying in balance. with where I am adding like the lights and the darks, like I'm doing right here. You can see how the white is kind of like the bridge. And I prefer to use the white, at least in this situation, something like this, in more of an additive process, um, as opposed, meaning I add the whites after the fact because it will blend it together and really just help it pop, but also um, because it helps for the harmony of the whole image. And I am in complete control at this point. This image started, it was an intuitive abstract image, and it wasn't even meant to be an image in the very beginning, because I was just testing what happens if I use all these different colors on the mineral paper. But very quickly it turned into something very important in terms of chasing the story. I began to fall in love with this image as it evolved, and using all of these different principles of design that I'm doing and that I'm talking about with all of this, you can see how this is just really beginning to pop. And it's just this back and forth, back and forth. And it's exciting. I was just elated while I was making this. It took over. I overdid it because I sat in one position for way too long, because it took me literally all day to paint this. But look at all of the detail that is in here, and the layers and the contrast. You know, that thing that turned into the sun is so complex. Look at all the colors. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't use so many different colors. But you'll see it's the contrast here between the yellow and orange and red, all those warm colors, in the middle of all of these cool colors. And the overall tone of the image is very warm. And that's consciously a choice that I made. My own interests and personal aesthetic is I like warmer things as opposed to cooler things. Getting to know that about yourself as an artist is huge, because then once you notice, you can begin to actually manipulate the image, the pigments and the image in the way that you want. But it took a lot of experimentation with the mineral paper, with different colors, with too much water, with not enough water, all kinds of those different things that would be very easy to say I failed. But all of it goes together. And when it starts going together is when you can actually start doing some exciting things. You know, and allowing, like right there, I actually am painting with stuff that's already on the paper. That line, that little line, made a huge difference right there. And it's that subtlety, those details, you know, learning the rules and then figuring out which rules are going to be good for you for what your purpose is. And I was playing throughout this whole image. And frankly, I think this is the best image I've ever done. And I'm what, 56 years old? And this right here, what is happening right now, this little bit of white, this right here is the most crucial part of this entire picture. Because this is me doing the demarcation between the sky and the ground. And this line, this white line, you will see as this continues, it became a touchstone in this picture for me. And so when I add the pens later, which I don't document all of, but enough that you can see what I'm doing, I'm putting in the mark. It's like my line in the sand. Honestly, it's just that important. And if you look in that area in the whole picture, you can see the definition that is coming. So it started incredibly chaotic, you know, but when I did those diagonals and did that, my very first stroke was that circle where the sun is. So boom, I claimed it. Then I added the ground at the bottom, not realizing it was the ground. And you can see how the composition just began to build itself. Here is an overlay of the final image over the painting as it is now.
Well, I definitely see titanium white in my future, because I'm really enjoying doing this part. And I'm aware that purists, which I have all the respect for, would hate what I'm doing right now. Because if you're doing watercolor, you know, the standard, the best standard, best practice, whatever, is not to add the whites back in at the end, like I am, but to preserve them in the first place. I have a hard time with that. Sometimes I do it, but usually I don't. And it doesn't bother me that I don't. If it bothers you, then by all means, don't do it. And I'm going to switch to my FW acrylic ink. Just putting a little bit on my plate here. I don't know if that's in the frame or not, but because I ran out of the titanium white watercolor.
And at this point, I'm going to start speeding the video up because I think you get the point.
This is the same thing that I do with my oil pastels. I use the white often to blend things. That's sort of what I'm doing right this second. And this is one of, excuse me, the duochrome, excuse me, watercolors. This is Duo Lapis Sunlight. So it's a blue and kind of yellow together. And this is Interference Gold. So it's a sort of a goldish, washy kind of thing. Now this is Iridescent Gold. And now this is just more of the white acrylic. And this is my dry brush. And now I'm going to use that brush that I've been using dry with the white acrylic, just to do some details here.
Watch how important blending and finishing the stroke down out into the image is really important. So watch for how that happens too.
Okay, I could do that for the rest of my life, but I'm gonna have to call it quits here. Okay, I have to go pick up some groceries. I'm gonna let this dry while I'm doing that. Hopefully my cats won't step in it. And I will be back.
As always, this has been Seeing Sideways. Do what makes you happy.